one of the primary complaints about the Georgia team since the 2021 team, unfair to compare anything to what they did that year, but one of the biggest complaints about Georgia's defense in particular, not just this football team, but the defense, is that they're not getting to the quarterback enough. They're not sacking the quarterback enough. Kirby has gone into numbers about that. You can look and see that the sack numbers for Georgia just weren't as good the last 2 years as they were in 2021. And they've had premier guys in the front seven back in 2021. Even back before that, you think about Azeez Ojulari, you think about Lorenzo Carter, Davin Bellamy, like NFL guys that go on and make an impact at the next level. They had a lot of that in 2021. In 2022, right, that talent level drops off a little bit. If Mikel Williams, this is the player that I feel like his shoulders are where this is being placed in this offseason. Just getting a lot of buzz. His GA performance helps with that. The attention he got during spring practice helps with that. The fact that he looks like Trayvon Walker, former number one overall pick in the NFL draft, former defensive end for the Georgia Bulldogs, part of that 2021 defense. He ended up being the sack leader for that team. People are expecting a Trayvon Walker type of experience from Michael. And so I'm telling you what, he's already given it. Because that's the thing is Trayvon wasn't this ultra productive player. He was a piece of an extremely talented defense. And he was extremely talented in his own right. And he obviously is because he's producing at the NFL level, having a breakout year in his sophomore NFL season. But the expectation seems to be that Mikel Williams is going to have, and he might, and I think he is going to have a really good year. Does that solve Georgia's problem that they don't get to the quarterback as much, right? I don't know. I do think that one superstar can change things. You saw Georgia defense in the past have some really big moments. I think about the 2012 team. They had some good players on the defense. I think about Jenkins. I think about those DBs were fun to watch back 10, 15 years ago for Georgia. And you think about Jarvis Jones. You think about Alec Ogletree. They had a lot of guys, but Jarvis Jones was a superstar-level player who made game-breaking plays for Georgia. Yes, I do think that if Mikel Williams has a season like that, we're talking about 10-plus sacks in college football, that's a lot. If he can do that for Georgia, we are talking about probably a different front seven than we were talking about the last 2 years. And 2 years ago, that front seven included Jalen Carter, who was a freak and is one of the best Georgia players that has gone through that building over the last few years on a long list that includes Brock Bowers and Stetson Bennett, Jordan Davis, all those guys. Jalen Carter's way up there on that list. And if I'm the one making the list, he's probably in the top five, just the best players that they've had during the last few years. Now it's Mikel Williams' turn. Is he going to be that guy? What does it mean for Georgia? Ryan Kelly from Dawg Post talking about Georgia's pass rushing, talking about Mikel Williams. Can he be the star that people are making him out to be this offseason? Because he's not a star at this point. He's not. I'm not blinking an eye to say that to you because he hasn't been. The numbers are not superstardom, right? 4.5 sacks. Fewer tackles in 2023, dealt with a little bit of injuries in 2023 as opposed to 2022, his freshman season. This is a guy that is expected to be a first-round pick a year from now. At the 2025 NFL Draft, there's 3 players who people point to, hey, that's a surefire first-round pick next year for Georgia. Carson Beck, Malachi Starks, Mikel Williams. And Mikel Williams might end up being the best pro prospect out of all them because he can't get enough really talented edge rushers at the next level. Beginning of this spring, they talk about it in the press conference leading into the first open practice period for the media, right? They want to get ahead of that. Instead of there being a headline that they have to deal with, they got ahead of it. Kirby talks about how Mikel Williams is standing up more. He's playing a little bit more of an outside linebacker role. He doesn't just have his hands in the dirt as a defensive end. There's going to be a little bit more versatility with Mikel Williams' game this year. You see that at practice, right? Well, what do we get? We get a practice viewing period that week. What happens? When I walk over to the defense, you see Mikel Williams going back and forth between the defensive line and the outside linebackers. It's like, okay, this is happening. You get to G-Day, and he's doing both. And he's making plays, and he's batting down passes, and he's intercepting a pass that he batted down, and You know that he can get to the quarterback. You know that he can clog up the run game when he's playing at a really high level. So him taking another step forward and maybe getting closer to superstar status, I think is totally in the question. But until he does that, I don't think it's fair necessarily to put this on his shoulders. This is a guy 6'5", 265. He looks like Trayvon. I might at this point in time, I hadn't decided what I'm going to use as a thumbnail for this video, but there's one picture that we have that I'm sure you've seen where he's like got his arm out and he's pointing at something. I need to hit the gym. It just looks like his arms are so long, and that's what it was with Trayvon. And you saw that in numerous plays in Trayvon's career. You saw it a little bit at G-Day when he was able to bat down that pass. In 2023, Georgia's defense, it just felt stagnant. It just wasn't as locked down as the two previous years. I didn't have the numbers pulled up. Now I do. Right, because it wasn't about, it was more of an eye test thing. They didn't pop. They didn't get to the quarterback and affect the quarterback the way that they had in years past. And, when you look at a 2021 defense as Lewis Seen, let's just go to the front seven. Nakobe Dean, Channing Tindall, Quay Walker at linebacker, 6 sacks, 5.5 sacks, 1.5 sacks. Nolan Smith, 4.5 sacks. 2.5 from Devontae Wyatt. Jordan Davis is out there. Keely Ringo's out there. I know I said front seven. Adam Anderson, before this stuff happened, had 5.5 of those sacks. He would have ended up with 10 probably. Trayvon ends up with 6. He's not even the leader. Robert Beal, an afterthought on that Georgia defense, was the sack leader with 6.5. So circumstances were good for Trayvon Walker, and he tested really well. He made a lot of impact, and he was drafted as a prospect. Mikel Williams is going to end up getting that same type of treatment, but will he end up playing better than what that actually is? And Trayvon was a big piece in the machine. Mikel Williams can be a huge piece in the 2024 machine if he takes a step forward, because this is a front seven that doesn't have Jalen Carter. It doesn't have Jordan Davis. It has Warren Brinson and Nazir Stackhouse, and they are great. They are very good football players, but they went back to Georgia for a reason. Their grades weren't as high as they wanted them to be. Well, why? They're not bona fide first-round picks. And that's part of why you expect more from Mikel Williams, because you think that about him. You think that about Malachi Starks. Christian Miller. Guys that really haven't played, Jamal Jarrett and Jordan Hall. You look at the outside, obviously you got Chess Chambliss, who's been around for a long time, but you look around, and there hasn't been a lot of guys that have been around and have been making a serious impact for a long time. And you look in that front seven, outside of Smile London, and really Mikel, and obviously Nazir Stackhouse has made some plays. How many of those have been super big contributors to a championship? None, right? And that's the case usually in college football, but this is different, and Georgia's been winning championships and competing for them. So I do think that there's been a lot of pressure put on Mikel's shoulders. I do think that he's totally capable of having a huge year, but he has to have a big year for Georgia's defense to look different in the front seven. I think that the linebackers are really good. I think that the defensive line kind of stayed the same ultimately. And unless they just play better, why should we expect a different result? You know what I mean? Why should we expect this result? He's got to step up and break out for things to change. In 2022, there's still a lot of studs on that defense, right? You think about the leftovers, and it was kind of everyone chips in. Everyone chips in. Christopher Smith had a sack. Javon Bullard had 3.5. 2 of those coming against Tennessee. 3 for Jalen Carter. 3 for Robert Beal. It just, the same pressure wasn't applied when they lost all of that NFL talent. And they have more NFL talent, but they just didn't have the quantity that they had that year. Mikel Williams is expected to be that guy. If he breaks out, it will solve Georgia's problem, quote-unquote, which has been not being super elite pass rushing the way that they were back then. Again, unfair to compare to history. Thanks for watching.